Be here today?
Unfortunately, we're in the process of relocating my family from Colorado to Ohio. So I was unable to travel this week. I probably could have, but then I don't know that my wife would have ever let me back in the house to our new location. So unfortunately, I have to testify remotely.
Okay, I just like to take the jury here through your background. I have in my hand your 4-page CV, and rather than putting it up on the screen and having you go through it line by line, could you just please tell the jury where you work, where you went to college, and how you got into the field we're going to discuss today?
Sure. So briefly, I recently took a new position with a research and development engineering firm known as Arctos, but I also still work part-time for a forensic engineering firm called Engineering Systems Incorporated. Prior to my recent switch, I was full-time with ESI for the last 11 years or so as an engineering consultant doing forensic engineering and accident reconstruction. Prior to that, I spent a little over 10 years in the U.S. Air Force as an engineer as well. My formal education includes a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the United States Air Force Academy, as well as a Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Dayton, Ohio.
Did you teach at the university, at the U.S. Air Force Academy?
I did. I spent a number of years there as an engineering professor, teaching a wide variety of mechanical engineering and automotive related engineering topics. I was also the operations director for the Applied Mechanics Research Lab there.
All right, and then you mentioned University of Dayton. What degree do you hold at the University of Dayton?
So that's a Master's of Science in Mechanical Engineering, emphasis in manufacturing, design, and automotive applications.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you were kind of splitting jobs at the moment. For purposes of today's testimony, who are you working for when our firm retained you?
Yeah, so I was, and I still do work for Engineering Systems Incorporated, known as ESI. So all of my work was done when I was a full-time employee there, and I still retain employment there just as a part-time employee.
And other than the U.S. Air Force Academy, do you lecture or teach anywhere else?
I do. I adjunct profess at the U.S. Air Force Academy still, as well as University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, University of Colorado, Denver, and a handful of other locations throughout the country.
And you mentioned a professional engineer. Are you a licensed professional engineer?
Yes, that's correct. I hold a license for engineering, specifically mechanical.
And then in terms of your affiliations, are there any societies or any other organizations that you are a member of?
Yes, I'm a member of numerous professional societies. Probably the most notable is the Society of Automotive Engineers, SAE, where I'm incredibly active with working a handful of research and design programs through SAE, collegiate programs with SAE, and then also handling some of the task force that are associated with developing standards and regulations for automotive applications worldwide.
Yeah, what is accident reconstruction?
So accident reconstruction broadly is the science of taking the knowledge of mathematics and physics and using it to essentially put together the puzzle pieces of what happened with an accident and to calculate and to assess the various parameters or values that might be related to it, and to generate opinions on relevant topics on that accident.
And in terms of accident reconstruction, how many accident reconstruction cases have you analyzed over your career?
I don't have an exact number, but I can tell you that I've been involved in well over 1,000 different cases associated with automotive accident reconstruction primarily, and also a handful of aviation cases too.
When you say automotive accident reconstruction, what are you trying to piece together?
Right. So anything automotive related, and that would include, when I say automotive, that generally includes motorcycles, pedestrians, bicycles, and also heavy trucks. A lot of heavy truck work that I do. And essentially, we're trying to piece together the actual vehicle dynamics, the motion of the vehicle, and how the accident might have occurred, and maybe some of the values that are relevant to that, so that we can understand as engineers how severe those accidents might have been.
And have you provided previous trial testimony as an expert in accident reconstruction?
Yes.
Here in Georgia?
Yes.
Approximately how many times have you testified at trial as an expert in accident reconstruction?
In trial, I believe 8.
Now, in terms, did our firm hire you to provide accident reconstruction?
Yes.
All right. And in terms of that, were you paid for your testimony?
Yes, I was.
All right. And in the payment of that testimony, does that alter your opinion either way just because you were being paid?
Not at all. To be completely clear, I'm paid a salary regardless. So whether I'm working in my office sending out emails or I'm here virtually testifying, doesn't really matter. I get paid the same.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to tender Mr. Bailey as an expert in accident reconstruction.
Plaintiff?
No objection.
All right, I'll allow the testimony.
Mr. Bailey, what were you specifically asked to do in this case?
So I was asked to assess the evidence that we have in this case and to look at that and to tie it together with engineering principles and to try to provide any relevant opinions that might be related.
Did you look at vehicle dynamics in your analysis of this case?
Yes.
What are vehicle dynamics?
Vehicle dynamics is simply the study of motion of a vehicle. Dynamics just means motion. So we're just looking at how the tractor trailer moved around in this case and how severe that motion might have been.
All right. In terms of your analysis, are there parameters that guide you in your analysis?
Yes, absolutely.
What are those?
There's quite a few different parameters that we might look at. The specifics of the truck, the tractor, the roadway. There's quite a number. So all of that has to be taken into account in some way, shape, or form.
All right. And in taking those into account, are there scientific or technical principles that you follow?
Yes, absolutely. There's quite a few different techniques or procedures in accident reconstruction to tie all those things together scientifically and to understand what's going on.
Do you have to factor in mathematics and physics and accident reconstruction?
Of course, yes.
Now, in terms of this case, when you're applying principles of mathematics, is there any type of system that you use to help you calculate data or process data?
Yeah, in this case, I chose to use a simulation software. So I chose to use a program known as HVE to help me with those calculations.
Is that HVE something used in your field of expertise?
Yes, quite a bit. In fact, it's likely the most widely used piece of software to do this type of work, and it's certainly considered the gold standard.
Is there a reason you use this HVE as opposed to just writing stuff out on a paper? Is there a reason you use HVE?
Sure. Same reason that I would use a calculator to do division calculations rather than handwritten long division, right? It's significantly faster to allow my computer to run those calculations for me rather than having to do them by hand.
In any of your testimony that you've provided in any trial court, has that HVE software been ruled out that you can't use it?
Never.
Okay. And in addition to math and the physics that you applied, what did you use for purposes of this case to help you form your opinions?
So there was some evidence provided to us that helped to generate those relevant parameters. There was a police report with some police related documents, video footage from dash cams and audio recordings as well from the police. There was some photographs taken of both trucks at the point that they came to a stop. And then most notably, there was several depositions, but the one by Mr. Bennett, I was certainly used and relied upon to do my analysis.
Now, in terms of the testimony of Mr. Bennett, obviously were you here for his testimony?
I was not.
Okay, so the only deposition you could rely on informing your opinions was the prior deposition testimony of Mr. Bennett?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and you talked about these photographs of the trucks. I'm going to pull up one and you just let me know if that was one that you reviewed for purposes of your opinions today. If you could pull up plaintiff 6, please.
So it pulled up, but the video, his video is over it. Give me just a second, see if I can change the layout. Nope. Okay, that worked.
All right, you see the picture up on your screen?
I do, yes.
Okay, is that one of the photographs you reviewed for purposes of your opinions?
Yes.
And what is your understanding of that photograph?
So this photograph is of the subject tractor trailer, the one that Mr. Bennett was driving the day of the accident. And this is after he had pulled the truck onto the exit ramp and onto the cross street and brought it to a complete stop.
And your statement about that, is that based upon the depositions you've read in this matter?
It's based on all of the evidence, including the dash cam footage of the police cars responding to the tractor trailers as they were stopped. We can position this specific image, including in the background. You can see the overpass, and you can see one of the police cars stopped behind the tractor trailer. All of that is consistent with the dash cam footage as well. So yes, between the depositions and the other evidence, I'm confident that this is the subject tractor trailer after it came to a stop.
And if you could take down 6, if you could put up plaintiffs 13 next. Do you see up on your screen this next photo?
I do.
Okay, and what is this a photograph of that you understood it to be?
This photograph, I believe, came in as part of one of the exhibits to Mr. Bennett's sworn deposition testimony. This was purported to be the subject truck also, although my analysis shows that this is not. This is an unrelated, different tractor.
Yeah. In terms of the actual physical evidence, what were the key pieces of evidence that you had to rely upon to form your opinions?
So I did use this photograph as part of my analysis, simply because it was provided as part of Mr. Bennett's testimony, and it's more severe as far as the collision damage that we see on this tractor. So since this shows more significant damage than the previous tractor that you had pulled up, my analysis is essentially based on the damage that we see here. So there's clear damage to the lower right corner of this, the passenger front corner. You can see the front bumper cover and the front fender has some minor damage to it. So essentially, my analysis is kind of based on this being the worst case scenario.
All right. And in terms of your experience of that accident reconstruction, you look at body damage to vehicles. Is that something you look at?
Certainly, yeah.
All right. And when you're looking at body damage to a vehicle, what are you looking for?
Well, I'm looking for, first and foremost, anything that is not stock, anything that is displaced or pushed in a different direction, maybe crushed inward. We see some creases or repositioning of components. Clearly, we can see that in this particular image on the lower right corner, that corner bumper piece has been pushed inward and backward a little bit. And it's actually cracked and deformed at its mounting position as well. So certainly displacement of components. I'll also look for scratches, paint transfer if it's between vehicles, or in this case, collision with a guardrail. There's usually some kind of witness marks of the silver galvanizing from the guardrail that scrapes across the bodywork. So I would look for any kind of witness marks or collision damage like that.
All right. In terms of determining how this accident occurred, whose testimony did you rely upon to create your opinion as to how the accident may or may not have occurred on July 1, 2020?
Mr. Bennett's deposition testimony.
All right. And then in terms of Mr. Bennett's deposition testimony, what else did you need to help form your opinions?
So again, I used his deposition testimony. I also used those photographs and the damage that we can see in those particular trucks, as well as analysis of the guardrail system and the roadway that we have at the subject location or the proximate subject location, and then also my own understanding of accident reconstruction and vehicle dynamics, all of my training and background in this as well, along with all of that evidence in order to calculate what I thought happened.
Sure. Mr. Scholl, the plaintiff's attorney, told the jury at the outset of this case that Mr. Bennett's truck kissed the guardrail. Was that your understanding of what was testified to by Mr. Bailey in the deposition you read? Excuse me, Mr. Bennett, excuse me.
My recollection of his deposition testimony is that he originally stated that it was more of a more significant impact than what I would imagine kissing the guardrail would incur.
Okay. And in terms of what Mr. Bennett actually testified to and what you relied upon, that would have been in his deposition transcript, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. And if you wouldn't mind, do you have a copy of Mr. Bennett's deposition transcript in front of you?
I do.
All right. If you could turn to page 33 and read slowly for the jury. And before you do that, if Your Honor could expand.
So we're gonna have to do a little bit of a dance when y'all push those up and down, but y'all just get my attention.
And if you could read page 33, line 12, and then I'll stop you, please. And you tell me if this is testimony you relied upon in forming your opinions.
Sure. Page 33, line 12.
Hold on,
Question.
Robert.
I'd like to get out the
Yes.
transcript, please. We didn't know that they were going to want the transcript. We just have to.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Bailey, while everybody's getting resorted for that, I just want to say out loud that sometimes when folks read, myself included, we tend to read a little faster than the court reporters can keep up with. And I'm not only the president of that, I'm also the founder. So just make certain, especially since you're virtual and you're about to read, be extra careful, extra slow, extra articulate, okay?
33.
Yes, sir. Understood.
You ready? All right. If you could start at line 12, page 33.
Line 12. Question. Did his vehicle come in contact with your vehicle? Answer. Yes. It came with the step. Yes. Question. I'm sorry. It came with what? Answer. In other words, as he was coming over, as I was going over, he continued. He came over. He dented my step where we get into the driver's seat. Question. So his vehicle did touch your vehicle? Answer. Yes. Question. Did your vehicle also collide with the guardrail? Answer. Yes. Yes. I hugged the guardrail. Yes. Question. Okay. Can you tell me about that portion of the accident? Answer. As he was coming into my lane, I was already set. I was at 63 miles per hour. My truck was governed at 64. His truck was not governed. He came over into my lane. As I was going left to right, left to right, left to right, I had to use the guardrail. Question. What do you mean by had to use the guardrail? Answer. I had to use the guardrail to keep my tires on the asphalt. In other words, I didn't want to go down to the down drop. I did not want to roll my truck. Question, as he was swerving into your lane, answer, he did not swerve, he came into my lane. Question, okay. So I want to understand the wording you are using. When you say came, you mean he didn't swerve in? Answer, no, ma'am. Question, you mean, answer, he came over.
Your Honor,
Question, fully over?
Robert.
All right, just
Yes.
a second, Mr. Bailey.
I'm gonna object.
All right, let's go on.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, that objection's overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Fletcher, if you'll instruct the witness where you wish him to begin.
I think you were at page 34, line 15, when you stopped.
Yes, I can pick up from there.
Okay.
Question, this is line 15.
Correct.
Question, as he was swerving into your lane, answer, he did not swerve, he came into my lane. Question, okay, so I want to understand the wording you're using. When you say came, you mean he didn't swerve in? Answer, no, ma'am. Question, you mean, answer, he came over. Question, fully over? Answer, yes, ma'am, he came over. Question, okay. As he came into your lane and you ended up off the road in the guardrail, did you try to honk at him or provide any signals? Answer, yes, ma'am, I used the air horn.
Okay.
Question.
Please stop. Mr. Bailey, in terms of this description of the accident from Mr. Bennett, did you rely upon this in forming your opinions?
Yes.
All right. And what was your opinions regarding how the accident scenario played out on July 1, 2020?
So my analysis was essentially using simulation processes to take a virtual version of a tractor trailer, very similar to the one driven by Mr. Bennett, and virtually collide that tractor trailer with a roadside guardrail system in the way that he's describing here, and consistent with other descriptions that he provided, as well as the evidence, the physical evidence that we have, in order to calculate the overall acceleration parameters of the vehicle upon impact with that guardrail.
And in terms of this simulation, did you make any assumptions to help you in the simulation?
Yes, in this case, we don't have a lot of other evidence to rely on. I don't have a collision debris field. I don't have skid marks. In fact, even the specific location of the exact guardrail positioning is largely unknown. So because of the fact that there's many unknowns in this case, what I had to do was assume the highest values I possibly could, or the lowest values I possibly could, the extreme values that are within reason, in order to give Mr. Bennett the complete benefit of the doubt in every way. So all of my assumptions that I had to use here were aimed at generating an answer that is the highest possible acceleration value that I could reasonably calculate. And again, all to provide him the benefit of the doubt.
What is acceleration value?
So acceleration it's an engineering term that we use regularly to describe the severity of an accident. The higher an acceleration value, the more severe the accident. Acceleration, one of the easiest ways to think about acceleration is if you consider driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour, and you exit the highway and you bring your car to a stop at a red light. You've taken your car from a certain speed, 60, and you've slowed down to 0 at that stoplight. And then you compare that to a different scenario, let's say driving 60 miles an hour, and you run headfirst into a concrete wall. Your car will also go from 60 miles an hour to 0, And the difference between those two scenarios is one takes a very long time and one is over in the blink of an eye. And I think most people can agree that those two scenarios are different. Whether you bring your car to a nice, slow, controlled stop versus slamming into a concrete wall, those are certainly different scenarios. And the difference between those is the acceleration. In the case of bringing your car to a nice, controlled stop, we have a very slow decrease in that speed, so a very low acceleration value. Versus slamming into a concrete wall, you would have a significantly higher value of acceleration.
All right, you talked about giving Mr. Bennett some benefit of the doubt. With respect to his truck in your simulations, how did you weigh that truck? Did you weigh that truck as a heavy truck, loaded, or an unloaded truck?
So in this case, we used a more lightly loaded truck. I believe his testimony in his deposition was that he had 45,000 pounds, give or take. And it was unclear in his deposition testimony whether that meant his load that he was carrying or whether that was his total weight for the entire tractor trailer system. So I assumed that it was his total weight. The reason I did that is that by using a smaller mass to the tractor trailer, given that same impact to a guardrail, would generate a higher acceleration rate. It would generate a much larger acceleration value. So again, we're giving him the benefit of the doubt. We're assuming that it's a very lightly loaded tractor trailer to assess what the acceleration would be in that extreme scenario.
Is a good way to analogize this being a small running back running into a giant lineman?
I think that would be a very, very good way of explaining it. Yeah, the difference is the mass value, and in that case, the smaller football player is going to experience a much higher acceleration and probably get laid out on the floor a lot easier.
All right. In terms of the guardrail that Mr. Bennett testified hitting, what did you assume, or what was the value you attributed to the type of guardrail for purposes of your simulation?
Right. So there's several different styles of guardrail out there. In the vicinity where Mr. Bennett was driving, most of it is the galvanized steel. We call it a W-beam. It's just a wiggly shaped steel beam. For purposes of my calculations, I actually assumed a rigid concrete barrier. And the reason I did that was because the W-beam style guardrails are a lot more flexible and they absorb the energy quite a bit. And by absorbing that energy, it helps to soften the blow. It helps to reduce that acceleration value. That's the purpose of those W-beam guardrails. So my calculations assumed a solid concrete barrier, again, in order to give the benefit of the doubt to Mr. Bennett and try to generate the highest possible acceleration values I could.
Okay. And using those assumptions, did you come to any opinion as to what acceleration value was placed upon the vehicle involved in this incident?
Yeah, my opinion is that given all of those assumptions and trying to generate the highest possible value, the most that Mr. Bennett's tractor could have experienced after impacting that guardrail was 4.2 Gs.
And this 4.2 Gs, how in your field do you categorize acceleration value of 4.2 Gs when you're trying to describe an accident?
Sure. There's many different ways to categorize the severity of accidents. There's several different standards and papers that I could use to classify how severe that accident was. In all of those cases, it would be classified as a minor or mild severity impact, which is the lowest classification level. Anything lower than that is only achieved with no impact whatsoever.
And this 4.2 G acceleration, that's based upon you assuming a lightly loaded truck hitting a concrete barrier. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, that's exactly right.
All right. And in terms of the calculations you made, did you create an animation to reflect your opinions?
Yes. So based on the simulation work that I did, those are calculated time steps, and the positioning of the vehicle is calculated at every step along the way. And we also created essentially a video output of that data. So you can call it an animation, but it's really the output of the simulation calculations directly.
Okay, and this animation you provided to us, right?
Yes,
Yes.
that's right.
All right, if we could pull up defendants 110. Stop it, please. All right. Does this look to be the beginning of the animation that you created that reflects your opinions in this matter?
Yes.
Okay, if you could press play. Does that reflect the data and the facts, the photographs, and the deposition testimony you received?
Yes.
All right. And is this animation based upon your experience, training, and background as an accident reconstructionist?
Yes.
Okay. If you could pull up, take that down, please, and put up Plaintiff's Exhibit 6. In your training as an accident reconstructionist, does this picture of truck number 6 reflect any contact with a guardrail as testified to by Mr. Bennett?
Not at all.
In terms of the two pictures between trucks 4 and 6, which truck actually would probably be closest to any contact with the guardrail?
Truck number 4 certainly looks like it had some, yeah, the one on the left there. That one certainly looks like it encountered some kind of an impact to the right front corner. I couldn't say that even that was an impact with the guardrail, though it is certainly more consistent with a guardrail impact than truck number 6.
Now, in this photograph of truck 6, there looks to be a semi-rectangular gouge in the front of the bumper. In your experience as an accident reconstructionist, what would that gouge indicate to you?
Yeah, there's a portion of cracked plastic on the underside of the bumper, almost directly underneath the fog light there. That is consistent with impact of road debris or running something over in the road, or maybe some kind of parking lot impact, maybe a higher curb or something along those lines that was struck on the lower portion of the valance, not a guardrail.
All right, in terms, you see that dirty patch of road underneath the tire in the front bumper?
I do.
There's testimony that that's a patch of leaking fluid. In looking at that picture and having investigated over 1,000 accidents, what are your thoughts on Mr. Bennett's testimony? That's a leaky fluid patch.
To me, that photograph, what you see there as a fluid patch is inconsistent with any kind of active fluid leak. If there was an active fluid leak on the tractor, we would see more puddling and more actual fluid there. That appears to be all absorbed into the asphalt. That looks to be like a existing dirty stain on the concrete, which is also consistent with the other photographs of the other the other angles of the tractor trailers that are both parked in this location. There's lots of dirty stains on the asphalt in that location.
Yeah. And in your experience as an accident reconstructionist, you have investigated accidents involving tractor trailers. Have you done that before?
Yes.
All right. In your experience, do you know how tractor trailers operate?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, and could you describe for the jury how the braking system works of the tractor and the trailer?
Sure. Without getting into too many details, it's an air brake system. So unlike most conventional vehicles that probably members of the jury are mostly familiar with, those use hydraulics or an actual hydraulic fluid. In the case of a tractor trailer, it actually uses air. It's got an onboard air compressor and air tanks to allow for that braking. And those air lines are actually connected between the tractor and the trailer. Often you'll see connected in between the two little curly Q hoses, red and blue hoses that connect the two together. Those are the air brake lines that run from the compressor and tank on the tractor back to the trailer. So it's all connected as one big system.
So what happens if a driver presses the brakes in the tractor? What happens to the trailer?
So it'll activate the air brakes on the trailer as well. So both the trailer and the tractor air brakes will engage. In fact, usually the trailer actually applies it slightly before the tractor, but all of the air brakes, if they're in proper service, will engage together.
All right. You weren't here for Mr. Bennett's testimony, and it'll be news to you, but in his testimony, he claimed that in braking or trying to come to a stop, the back trailer slammed up behind his tractor, causing some whiplash. Is there any evidence to support that opinion based upon the materials you reviewed, your background and your experience in investigating these incidents?
Yeah, there is no evidence of that whatsoever. In fact, all of the evidence that we do have directly contradicts that. This photograph, as well as the dash cam footage of the police cars, show the vehicles combined together as they should be. And if there was any such impact loading like that, that would require the tractor or trailer to be hauled off separately on a wrecker, which was not at all indicated by any of the police reports. So again, that's not consistent at all with any of the evidence.
Okay. That's all I have, but are there any other opinions you would like to share with this jury at this time?
I think the only other thing that just to be, in the interest of being complete, my original opinion was not just the 4.2 Gs that occurred, but also the directionality. That impact is essentially a 45-degree impact. So from the driver's, trying to do this with hands on video, not exactly easy, but from the driver or from the passenger front, kind of, at the 1:30 or 2 o'clock position into the tractor. So essentially that loading is causing the tractor to slow down and kind of get pushed to the left a little bit upon impact with the guardrail, again, if that impact occurred. So that directionality is also important, not just the severity of it.
And that directionality, just so I understand you and to summarize, that would be forward and kind of towards the guardrail?
Yeah, so we classify the directionality if you look at a top-down view of the car with or the truck in this case, with the very front of the tractor being essentially your 12 o'clock position. You can look at it from like a clock face kind of orientation. So at the 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock position is essentially from, the impact is coming from the passenger front towards the driver in the rear of the vehicle. So it's in that general direction. So it's more consistent with a frontal collision. It's not a rear end collision. It's also not a complete sideways collision. It's kind of somewhere in between, coming from that passenger side towards the driver and towards the rear.
And this collision that you're talking about, that collision, whether it occurred or not, what is that based on?
Well, again, my analysis is assuming that collision to the guardrail occurs as Mr. Bennett described in his testimony. There is, when we look at that number 6 truck, there's really no physical evidence that is consistent with that level of guardrail impact to the front right corner of his truck. But my analysis is based on the assumption that it did occur.
All right. Thank you for your time. And now, if you just mind answering questions from Mr. Scholl.
Of course.
Mr. Scholl, Cross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Bailey.
Good afternoon, sir.
Are you an unbiased witness in this case?
Yes.
You don't have any leaning for the law firm that hired you in this case?
No, not at all.
How much have they paid you for your analysis in this case?
Frankly, I don't know. Like I described before, I get paid a salary, so I don't really actually get paid directly by any firm that hires me.
How much have they billed to your firm in this case?
I don't know the answer to that, sir. I'm not the project manager on this particular case. Dr. Amber Stern is, so she would be a better person to ask about that.
She'd be I believe it was between $20,000 and $30,000 3 years ago. Is it a lot more than that, you think?
Honestly, sir, I don't know. It's certainly more than that because there's been more work that's been done since that point. But I couldn't tell you exactly. But that sounds reasonably accurate.
And the defense lawyers that hired you in this case, you've worked with them at least half a dozen times, at least at the time of your deposition, is that right?
That sounds about right. Yes, sir.
And they've worked with Ms. Stern, your colleague, 10 or 15 times, correct?
Again, you'd have to ask her specifically, but I have no reason to disagree with that.
Now, the original firm on this that took the deposition of Mr. Bennett, that wasn't the firm that hired you, right?
I don't recall who specifically took Mr. Bennett's deposition.
Okay. Now, you understand what the phrase garbage in, garbage out means, right?
Of course.
Okay. And what does it mean?
Essentially, you're saying that if I make bad assumptions, then my answer is going to be bad also.
Well, I'm not personalizing it to you. I'm just generally, does it stand for the proposition that if you have bad input going in, that you'll have bad output coming out?
I believe that's what I kind of alluded to. Yes.
And you said in your deposition that more data is better, correct?
Of course, as an engineer, more data is always better.
And you said you base your simulation on what Mr. Bennett said at his deposition, correct?
In part, yes.
Right. And now you never met Mr. Bennett or interviewed him, right?
No.
Did you take into account in your simulation everything that Mr. Bennett said at his deposition?
I took into account what was stated that was associated with the impact of the guardrail, which is the most severe impact that could have occurred.
Well, you included some parts of his deposition and then excluded other parts, what he said, didn't you?
I used all of his deposition in my analysis to some degree.
Okay, well, how did you scientifically determine what you were going to put in and what you believed of his deposition and what you didn't believe?
It's not a matter of what I did or did not believe. It was what was appropriate to assess the values, and again, to provide the highest possible values that I could. So if there were statements that were made that would result in lower acceleration values, I gave him the benefit of the doubt there to try to generate, again, a higher possible acceleration.
Now, in Mr. Bennett's deposition, it wasn't videotaped, was it?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, you just got a transcript. You didn't get a videotape of him testifying, correct?
That's correct. I just used a written transcript.
And then a lot of it talks about his head's, he's describing his head moving. It just says indicating, just the words indicating, but you don't know what he's doing in that testimony, do you?
Not when it says, he's indicating. No, I don't know exactly what he's describing at that point.
Now, I want to go to the motor vehicle accident report. Can we pull that up, please? And you reviewed the motor vehicle accident report in your analysis and
Yes.
forming your opinions in the case. And I
Yes,
just
sir.
saw in your simulation there was 2 lanes on that interstate, right? But how many lanes? Can we go to the first page? How many lanes are there actually on that part of the interstate?
There's 3.
There's 3, but you just put 2.
Just a graphical representation. What is represented there is the actual motion of the tractor trailer. That's what's calculated. The rest of it is just for graphics.
Okay. What about did you read the 911 or did you listen to the 911 tapes?
Yes, I listened to not only the 911, but I think there was also police audio recordings and things like that as well.
Did you listen to the 911 tapes from other drivers coming in before the impact that Mr. Bennett had?
I don't recall that. I certainly remember reading some of the CAD transcripts that came in. I don't recall specifically any other 911 calls.
Okay. Now, in your simulation, you just have the dump truck driver sort of merging in, sideswiping Mr. Bennett's vehicle. And is that really what happened?
Again, I'm not trying to say that that is specifically the exact positioning of the vehicles or anything like that. My purpose of the analysis was only to quantify the most that impact could possibly be, the highest level of acceleration. So the rest of what you're seeing there is just kind of to give reference points and to understand the general positioning and the general motion.
Right. In the portion of the deposition, Mr. Bennett, you read, he said the driver came at him, like he was coming straight sort of at him. And Mr. Bennett testified he was at a 30-degree angle. Your simulation doesn't have a 30-degree angle, does it?
No, sir, that would be physically impossible.
Let me show you. Can we put up the 911 tapes, the transcript? I showed an opening. And I'll represent to you that we showed this an opening, and these are transcripts of the 911 tapes.
Your Honor,
Yes.
your approach.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we're all on the same page. So these are trends. You make it.
Okay. No, no. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Scholl, you may continue with my instructions.
Mr. Bailey, if the 911 callers reported that the dump truck was going from one side of the three-lane highway to the other side, into the emergency lane, into the medians, and was going back and forth during that time, just sort of snaking back and forth, that would be a much steeper angle of attack than what you have in your simulation, wouldn't it?
That could be. It would not be 30 degrees. That's still physically impossible. But the angle could certainly be different. That doesn't really matter as far as my calculations or simulation goes. That's just a representation of the relative positioning of those two vehicles. The calculations really are associated with Mr. Bennett's tractor trailer impacting the guardrail and the maximum possible acceleration value that could have occurred.
But since you listen to the 911 tapes and you know it's a 5-lane highway and he was coming back and forth among all those, why wouldn't you put that in your simulation?
Because it's irrelevant to the calculations that I was doing. So it would just take extra time to add in more detail and to precisely add that. And there's not really a need to do that.
And in the section of Mr. Bennett's deposition you referenced, and I'm looking at page 34, and it says, my truck was governed at 70-64. His truck was not governed. He came over into my lane, and as I was going left to right, left to right, left to right, I had to use the guardrail. Where is Mr. Bennett going left to right in your simulation?
Again, that doesn't matter as far as my simulation goes, because the eventual calculations that are relevant are the sudden swerve and impact into the guardrail. Going left and right doesn't matter ahead of time. That doesn't change the result of an impact with the guardrail itself. So this is the way, by doing just a single motion into the guardrail, you can get the highest level of strike into the guardrail. Anything else, if I added that in, that would have resulted in even more speed reduction and therefore a smaller impact with the guardrail and a lower overall acceleration value. So I chose to instead just assume a direct impact with the guardrail.
But the doctors that have testified in this case say the left and right movement was significant because that can cause a central cord syndrome that Mr. Bennett suffered from. So it's
Objects mischaracterizes their testimony.
Overruled.
Thank you. So that's significant. That should be significant in your simulation if you're using it with respect to disproving whether Mr. Bennett suffered an injury, correct?
I have no opinion on the injury causation or anything like that. My my entire goal here was only to quantify the maximum that impact could have possibly been. Anything else beyond that is significantly smaller as far as the acceleration rates go. So from a vehicle dynamics standpoint, they're insignificant relative to that impact with the guardrail.
In your simulation, you entered Mr. Bennett's vehicle that he was driving was a 1999 through 2004 Freightliner Columbia. Did you not?
No, sir. That was just a label that was used for the vehicle. The actual dynamics, the actual calculations were not that. That's just the label that was used.
We pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 120, please. All right, can we focus on that top block, please? All right, you have the vehicle name in your data entry, and this is from 2022. It's a Freightliner Columbia, 1999
Yes.
through 2004. That's what you have?
Yes, that's just the basic model that it was based on, and then the parameters were modified to the subject vehicle associated with that. So that's just where the original model came from. Of the graphics that are associated with it, has nothing to do with any of the calculations that are present according after that.
Mr. Bennett was driving a 2014 Cascadia, correct?
As I recall, that is correct. And the Cascadia and the Columbia line are essentially the exact same truck. The only difference is just some of the interior amenities and the niceness of the tractor. And again, all of the mechanicals that you read down below that line are all based on his tractor that he was driving and the specs that were pulled for his tractor. So you're just reading the label that was placed on there, but it has nothing to do with the calculations.
You used a model that was up to 15 years older than the model he did, and why wouldn't you just put in the model he used? The make and model.
Again, that's just the initial CAD model. The graphics that it was based on has nothing to do with the calculations itself. There was no point in changing that.
Mr. Bailey, you also said that, or you also entered that Mr. Bennett's weight was 43,000 pounds. Do you recall that?
I know, as I recall, it was 47,000 and change. It was based on 45,763, as I recall, which is consistent with his deposition testimony of what he was weighing.
In his deposition, he said it was 80,000, did he not?
May I consult deposition page 35, line 18?
Mr. Bailey?
Yes, may I read that?
Sure.
So on page 35 of his deposition, actually starting at line 14, he states, I got out after eventually stopping. It took about probably 100 or so yards to stop the truck because I was fully loaded and I was very, very heavy. Actually, I was 45,763 pounds. Now, to me, that is unclear on whether or not that was the load he was carrying or his total weight. And so what I assumed is that would be the total weight, because again, as I testified to earlier, by assuming a lower weight, that maximizes the acceleration value that we're going to see upon impact with the guardrail. So because that was ambiguous and not super clear, I went in Mr. Bennett's favor and chose to give him the benefit of the doubt, chose that lower weight for my calculations, such that the acceleration value was the highest it could possibly be.
You had the bill of lading that showed his load was that same amount, 43,000 pounds, did you not?
I don't recall. Maybe at the time that I wrote that opinion, I might not have had that, or it wasn't. Again, it was unclear. But because of his deposition testimony being unclear on that, I just chose that as the lowest value. Again, that is the point of accident reconstruction, is to choose those assumptions that help to understand the maximum and minimum values that we could possibly be and know that it's within that range. So by using that value of 45,000 total, I'm able to determine the most acceleration we could possibly see here.
Now, Mr. Bennett talked about in his deposition, in addition to going side to side, he said he hit the guardrail, he slammed on his brakes, he downshifted and came to a stop abruptly. Your simulation doesn't record that information. It doesn't.
Oh, no, it does include
like that
braking. It does include all of that. Yeah.
Right, but he said he broke, and his trailer, when he broke, came up and moved his kingpin and his fifth wheel. You don't have any of that in your analysis, do you?
None of that was in his original.
pause, Rob.
sworn-
Mr. Bailey, there's an objection.
Maybe approach.
Yes?
Thank you.
Mr. Bailey, in his deposition, he talked about downshifting and hitting his brakes, correct?
Yes, as I recall.
Okay. And he said he made it, in his testimony here, he said he hit the brakes. He said his trailer came into him. You don't have that reflected at all in your simulation, do you at all?
The fact that his trailer came into him.
No, the fact that
Is
his
that
trailer moved his, hit the fifth wheel and moved him forward. You don't have that in your simulation, do you?
No, sir, I do. All of that is calculated. The interaction between the tractor and the trailer through the kingpin is all calculated values. Yes.
Mr. Bailey, do you have a commercial driver's license?
I do not.
Have you ever been to truck driving school?
No.
Have you ever had to stop an 18-wheeler that's swerving at high speed in confined area space?
No, sir.
Do you know what a fifth wheel is?
Of course.
Now, Mr. Bennett testified in his deposition he had damage to the fifth wheel, correct?
I don't recall specifically what his deposition testimony was in regards to that. There's certainly no evidence, no physical evidence that that occurred.
And how would you know that? Did you inspect the vehicle?
No, sir, I did not.
Okay. Have you ever been to Georgia for this case?
Yes.
Have you ever been to Georgia for this case?
So subsequent to my deposition, I was in Georgia and I did drive by the accident location in order to inspect and assess the subject area there.
So you went by the accident location.
Yes.
Where was it?
I don't recall specifically off the top of my head.
What mile marker was it?
128, I believe, but I'd have to go back and look at my notes to confirm.
Okay. When Mr. Bennett's 911 tape, he's chasing after the defendant. He says he's passing mile marker 127. So how could you be at 128 if they go up as you go north? How could you be at 128 and be at the accident location?
So I drove up and down that entire stretch of I-75 to see if I can find any evidence of the subject accident or replacement of the guardrail or impact points to the guardrail or anything of the such. So I don't know the specific location. I don't know that anybody knows the exact point in which he reportedly hit the guardrail, but I certainly drove up and down that area trying to find it. So I assessed that.
And we don't know the exact location because the defendant vehicle left the scene and fled the scene, and they had to follow them, and the cops had to chase him down, correct?
I couldn't say that's why we don't know the location. I certainly know that that's the reported testimony, yes.
Now, you looked at the post-rec photographs of Mr. Bennett's vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And you did that because that's an important part of your accident reconstruction analysis is to look at the damage photos and look at the vehicle.
I would agree that looking at all of the available evidence is certainly paramount to my investigation.
All right. And you looked at or you requested from the defendants all the information available to them about the damage to either vehicle or both vehicles, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you've seen the video of the trooper walking around Mr. Bennett's vehicle, have you not?
Yes.
Okay. What did he assess the damage to Mr. Bennett's vehicle to be?
I don't recall specifically. I'd have to look at the police report to confirm, but I don't recall him noting anything on the passenger side. I think he noted some light damage on the front right corner.
Okay, can we pull up the accident report, please, and go to Mr. Bennett's number on the right, please? Sorry, can we go down? Yeah. So on the right column there, sir, where it says, if you go down to, it starts out non-motor maneuver, then vision obscured, and then under that is damage to vehicle. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. What did the officer assess Mr. Bennett's damage to be at his vehicle?
You would have to look at what a number 3 represents.
And you never looked at that?
No, of course I did.
Well, what is it?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I'd have to look at the code sheet to remember.
You don't have the code sheet with you?
Not as I sit here today.
Can we pull up the code sheet, please? I have it, Mr. Bailey. I don't have to pull it up for you. I'll represent to you, this is the Georgia GOT overlay that has the codes for this accident report. Okay. So what does 3 correspond to, sir?
It states functional damage.
So the officer that was walking around Mr. Bennett's vehicle and wrote the accident report wrote that he had functional damage to the vehicle, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you ever talk to the officer? Did you ever call the officer about that assessment?
No.
Did you ever talk to any law enforcement officer that was involved in the investigation of this case?
No.
Now, there was a guardrail repair bill that was sent to the defendants by the Georgia GOT for $3,872. Do you recall that?
Yes, I believe I recall that.
And they paid that bill, didn't they?
As far as I know.
Okay. And the length of guardrail that had to be replaced was 75 linear feet, correct?
I'd have to look at that document to confirm, but that sounds accurate.
But Mr. Bennett said that it took him 100 yards to stop. Do you remember that? In his
I
deposition?
remember his deposition testimony where he said that, yes.
And that's 4 times the 75 feet in the guardrail, correct?
Yes.
And you used the 75 feet for your simulation, didn't you not?
No, sir. The 75 feet was just essentially the impact portion and maybe some stopping as well. In fact, I actually assumed that he could stop even faster to, again, maximize that acceleration value to bring his truck to a more rapid stop. But just because 75 feet of guardrail had to be replaced does not indicate that that's exactly what was damaged as a result. Oftentimes when a guardrail is repaired or replaced, a much more significant section has to be completely removed and reinstalled, more than just where the impact damage occurred.
What were the specific components that were damaged on Mr. Bennett's truck?
Specifically, I don't know, other than what's in that photograph, which shows some minor damage to the front right bumper and hood, some scratching and the cracked plastic as we discussed before.
You never looked at an itemized estimate of an inventory of all the items of Mr. Bennett's truck that were damaged?
I believe there was some estimates or an estimate with a couple of dollar signs associated with repair to the tractor trailer, but it wasn't specific or itemized as I recall.
Okay. Did you ever see a itemized list of damage to the truck that was sent by the owner of the truck 2 days after the accident to the defendants?
I don't recall. I'd have to, if you pull it up, maybe I could look at it and tell you.
But as you sit here now, you have no recollection of ever receiving any itemized bill from the defendants.
I don't recall ever seeing an itemized repair list of exactly what needed to be replaced on the truck as a result of this accident.
Can we pull up 109, please? Okay. I'll represent to you, this was from the owner of Mr. Bennett's vehicles. This was texted to the defendants 2 days after the accident. Have you ever seen this document?
I might have seen that document. It's hard for me to remember, but it's possible.
Okay. And you see on that second line, it says replacement of the front bumper, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and as I look at this, none of this is consistent with the number 6 truck. This is all consistent with the number 4 truck, the damage that was incurred to that one. None of what's indicated here is shown on that photograph. I would not expect any of this to have to be replaced or repaired as a result of what I see on that number 6 truck.
So this is a false estimate.
I don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that it's not consistent with the damage that I see on truck number 6.
Well, you agree that the number 6 is the truck that was involved in the accident, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you saw the overpass, and that's the truck that Mr. Bennett was driving at the time, correct?
Yes.
And when Mr. Bennett went home, this was what the owner of the truck sent to the defendants. And you're saying this is not the truck that was involved in the accident?
I don't know that. I'm telling you that this is inconsistent with the damage that we see on that number 6 truck. It's more consistent with the damage that's seen on the number 4 truck.
Okay, so do you know who drafted this estimate?
No.
Who owned the truck?
JRC, as far as I remember.
Okay. Now, in your deposition, in your deposition, you said that there was fluid leaking from Mr. Bennett's truck. The same, can we put up that exhibit under his truck? You said there was fluid leaking from it at your deposition 3 years ago, did you not?
I said possibly, and that's my analysis is based on that possibly being leaking fluid, and so that would indicate if there was in fact an impact with the guardrail. I'm taking into worst possible scenario that maybe that is, but my honest answer is I don't believe that to be actual leaking fluid. There is no physical evidence of visible fluid right there. So if that is leaking fluid from the tractor, it's a minor amount that had leaked quickly and stopped leaking or something along those lines, because there is no visible fluid there. It's just absorbed into the asphalt.
All right. Now, Mr. Bailey, you're an accident reconstructionist. And my next question is, did Mr. Bennett's truck hit the guardrail or not?
I don't know the answer to that. My analysis is assuming that it did, but the damage that we see on truck number 6 is inconsistent with any guardrail strike. The evidence that should be there is not.
Okay, but the defendants paid the guardrail bill, right? The guardrail repair bill.
That's my understanding, but that has nothing to do with whether or not this truck actually hit a guardrail or not.
All right, I'd like to pull up, now just going back to this fluid question, I'd like to bring up your deposition. You're saying now you don't know if the fluid was from this truck, correct?
I don't know. Yeah, that's my testimony now is I don't know. It does not look like it is from this truck. It might be. And my original deposition testimony was I'm going to assume that it is. So my calculations are associated with a strong impact into a guardrail in order to cause some kind of fluid leak like that.
Now, for this truck, there was a payment negotiated from the owner of the truck with the defendants, and this correct? They paid for the damage to this truck, correct?
Okay.
You know that's true, correct?
I don't know who
Your Honor,
paid who.
mischaracterizes any prior testimony. That is completely inaccurate.
All right, that's overruled. Just rephrase the question.
Mr. Bailey, do you have information that the defendants paid for the damage to Mr. Bennett's truck? Or is the owner?
As far as I understand, it was repaired and somebody paid the bill. I don't know the details on who that was or when or where, but that's my understanding.
Can we pull up the truck repair agreement? What number? Number 9. Mr. Bailey, you've seen this document, haven't you? It's in your file. You testified about it at your deposition, correct?
Yes, I recall seeing that.
Okay, and having read it, you know this is a motor vehicle repair agreement between the defendants and JRC, the owner of the truck, correct?
Yes, but your question was whether or not they paid the bill. I don't know. I'm not looking at their checking account, so I can't confirm if they actually paid the bill or not. I can tell you that an agreement existed. I can tell you that they intended to. I don't know any details more than that.
All right, can we scroll down, please, on the agreement? Do you know who drafted this agreement, Mr. Bailey?
Not off the top of my head.
Was it, do you know for sure, was it the defendants?
I don't know.
Okay. Can we go to the details of the accident? All right. It says this claim or dispute occurred on July 1st, 2020 as a result of, alleged damage caused when Jeff Evans changed lanes, causing Lewis Bennett, the driver of the JRC Express LLC, to come into contact with the guardrail. Did I read that right?
Yes, you read that correctly.
So there's a truck repair agreement, and it's between the owner and the defendants, and it talks about the damage to the guardrail, and this is a payment, or this is about a payment for that, correct?
No, sir. This is not about payment for the damage to the guardrail. This is about payment to alleged damage to the tractor.
Well, how could there be damage to the tractor if it didn't impact the guardrail?
Again, this is alleged damage that occurred associated with that. So there was some impact marks on the front of the tractor trailer. You can see some scraping and stuff on the number 6. Obviously, there was damage on the number 4 that was a little more significant. They chose to pay the bill. I couldn't tell you why.
All right, can we go to the amount they paid? How much was the amount that they paid?
I don't recall, maybe 3,600 or something like that, as I recall, somewhere around there.
All right, let's highlight that whole section, please. $3,600, is that the amount?
That's what it says there in the agreement.
Okay. Can we go to the signature page? And is that signed by JRC Express and Transcontinental Carriers?
It appears to be.
And is there a provision in this agreement that says also covers loss or of injury to a person?
I don't know.
Do you see Mr. Bennett's name on this document?
Not that I recall, but I don't know. It actually might have been in that accident description or something, but I don't really recall.
All right, can we, so you're saying that there's no damage in the pictures that you see that's consistent with this $3,600 payment? Is that right?
That is not at all what I said, sir.
Okay.
I said that there is no damage to that number 6 truck that is consistent with a guardrail impact.
Okay. So do you think there's damage to, do you think the truck was damaged at all on this, in this incident on July 1st, 2020?
I don't know the answer to that. What I can tell you is that number 6 truck right there shows damage to that front right corner. There is some scraping. There is some broken plastic below the fog light, as we had already talked about. There's a little bit of scuffing on the fiberglass fender paint just directly behind the headlamp. So there is a little bit of damage to the front right corner of this tractor. I don't believe any of this is consistent with impact to a guardrail.
Do you think the damage here is consistent with the repair bill of the $3,600 that was negotiated between the parties?
I couldn't tell you the answer to that.
Okay. Can we go to page 66 of his deposition? Line 6.
You're in Burke. This is Spalding. Sorry, you're on the wrong deposition.
Um, 10, 15 more minutes. I'll take a break.
All right. Members of the jury, y'all have been patiently at this for about an hour and 25 minutes now. I try to take a break about every hour. I'm sorry to break up. I'm apologizing to the attorneys for breaking up testimony midstream, but I do want to give everybody a break, especially since we just came back from lunch. So, as you step out of this room, and do not talk about this case with anyone, don't turn your phones on, don't investigate this case in any way. You're only to get information from the witnesses that testify under oath and the exhibits and the law you get from me and nowhere else. Don't forget there's a bathroom down the hallway. As soon as y'all are ready to come back in, we will resume. Thank you very much. You may step into the jury room. Again, this is just long enough a break for everybody to stretch their legs and step to the restroom. James, if you'll watch that door just for a second. Mr. Bailey, you there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Mr. Bailey, these are just instructions that everybody already has, but I'm just being very careful since you're virtual. While we're on this quick break, do not review your notes. Do not talk to anybody about this case. I want to pick it up just where you were, exactly as we finished, okay?
Understood, sir.
All right, thank you very much. That's just standard instructions I give all witnesses.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Scholl, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Vince, ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Jerry, come on back in. Margaret.
You got it pulled up?
Yeah, then come on back in. Mr. Bailey, there you go. You're good to go. All right. Everybody turn your phones off, and Mr. Scholl, you may ask your next question.
Thank you. Could we turn to page 66 and put up that line of his deposition, please? All right. Mr. Bailey, do you see the deposition on the screen?
Yes.
Can, Judge, I can't, can we move his picture down? a little bit?
Yeah, give me just a second. I know how to do it. I just need to remember.
All right, she can adjust.
You got it. Sorry, Liz. Or Dan, whoever has it.
Okay, question. And can you, from looking at this photo, itemize $3,600 in damage that was paid by Transcontinental to repair the truck? Answer. Again, I don't have an itemized description of all the individual components that were repaired, but what is visible in this photograph is the right passenger side front bumper and cover. The lower valance is cracked. There's a scrape and a gouge on the right front fender just after the headlight assemble. There might be some damage to the headlight assembly as well. That's unclear, but there certainly could be damage to the headlight assembly. All of the damage there is certainly consistent with a $3,600 repair bill. Did I read that right, Mr. Bailey?
Yes.
Okay. And just for the record, you in this, in your response here, you admit that you hadn't seen the itemized bill in your deposition 2023 that was, that I just showed you from the owner of the vehicle sent 2 days after the accident, correct?
Yes, that's likely the case. I didn't have that at the time of my deposition. It also is inconsistent with the total amount here. This was $3,600, and I believe that one you just showed me was $4,700 or something like that for the itemized breakdown.
Have you seen the
So
text?
not exactly consistent. I'm sorry, what was the question?
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Have you seen the text between the defendant and JRC, the owner of the truck?
Not that I recall.
Okay. So your position is that the impact with the guardrail didn't occur, but if it did, the maximum force or the maximum acceleration is only 4.2 Gs. Is that your testimony?
Essentially, although I would like to clarify that a little bit, I cannot confirm whether or not there was any impact with the guardrail. I can tell you that there is no direct evidence that is consistent with impact with the guardrail. But my analysis was as you described, based on if there was an impact with the guardrail, what is the most that it could possibly be as far as the acceleration severity? And that answer is 4.2.
All right. Can we pull up your opinions, Exhibit 106? I'll submit to you, we got these from you. These were drafted on December 27,
Objection, Your Honor.
2022.
May we approach?
Yes. I'm morally with you, Mr. Fletcher, but I'm obligated to allow thorough.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can we look at opinion 1, please? Exhibit 106. As a result of the subject, now these are the opinions you submitted to our office 3 years ago in this case, correct? 2.5 years ago.
Yes, sir.
Opinion 1, as a result of the subject impact with the guardrail, Mr. Bennett's vehicle experienced a resultant acceleration of less than 4.2 Gs. Did I read that right?
Yes.
Okay. And can we go to number 4? The photographs of the Freightliner tractor identified by Mr. Bennett during his deposition were not of the subject tractor, and therefore immaterial to the analysis of the subject accident. Did I read that right?
Yes.
All right. So, sir, are you a licensed professional engineer in the state of Georgia?
No, my license is in Colorado.
Now, for your accident reconstruction education, you went to a 1-week course in Florida, correct?
In addition to a whole bunch of other specific training associated with accident reconstruction, that's one of them. Yes.
Okay. You've never been trained by any federal, state, or local government agency about how to do a forensic motor vehicle investigation by law enforcement, correct?
That's not correct.
You've worked as a police officer investigating accidents?
No, I didn't say that.
They're trying to get my attention. Okay, thank you, though.
I'm sorry, you've worked as a law enforcement officer, sir?
No, sir, I did not say that.
Okay. Have you worked as a law enforcement officer?
No, I have not worked as a law enforcement officer.
Out of the 300 accidents you claim to have worked in your career, you've only been on the scene of the accident once when the police were actually there, correct?
To clarify, I've worked over 1,000 accident reconstruction cases, probably 300 of them involving tractor trailers. So just to be a little more clear on that one. At the time of my deposition, that was probably true that I only had investigated and been on site while the police were there at one point. I think there's been at least 2 more times that I can recall since then that I've been on site while the police were still there investigating.
Okay. But at the time of your deposition, at the time of your deposition 3 years ago, you'd only been to the scene once where the police were actually on the scene investigating, correct?
That's correct. Usually I get called into the case much later in the evolution of that case.
All right. Just talk to Mr. Did you talk to Dr. Frankel, a doctor hired by the defense in this case to analyze Mr. Bennett's injury?
No, sir.
Did you know that he said a trivial trauma that moves the neck in a certain way can cause the spinal damage like Mr. Bennett had? Did you know
I
that?
didn't know that, and I would not have used that as part of my analysis.
But the 4.2 Gs that you're talking about is greater than a trivial trauma, correct?
I don't know what a trivial trauma is in his world.
Well, he suggested it could be sitting back in a barber chair or a dentist chair when you move your head sharply back in a certain way. That would be less than 4.2 Gs, correct?
It sounds like you're asking questions that are in a biomechanical nature. Those questions would be much more suited for Dr. Amber Stern.
So you don't know the answer, or you don't know the answer to that question.
I'm not holding any opinions on biomechanical analysis like you're describing.
All right. And with respect to the 4.2 G number, can you demonstrate that now? Can you come up with that calculation?
I'm sorry, sir. I don't quite understand the question.
Well, you've testified that Mr. Bennett felt if he hit the guardrail, he had a resultant acceleration on his body of 4.2 Gs. And you said you plugged that into some simulation software. Can you do that by your hand, by just drawing it out?
So I'm going to clarify the question a little bit because the way you posed it is incorrect. I did not testify that he experienced 4.2 Gs to his body. My testimony here is that his tractor experienced a maximum acceleration of 4.2 Gs. I hold no opinions associated with the body or the personal effects of that. What I can tell you is 4.2 Gs in the world of accident reconstruction in motor vehicle collisions is very minor. It is absolutely in every category, in every way conceivable. It falls into the most minor categorization of a motor vehicle accident.
Can you come up with that number? Can you show your work and come up with that number right now?
Can I come
4.2
up with that number?
Yeah, calculate that number and show us how you got there.
Sure. Yeah, we can sit here for hours and hours and days, and I can run by hand and calculate how we get to that value, which is why I used a simulation program, because it does it in a fraction of the time.
Okay, and we can't know what you input in the simulation program to come up with that number, correct?
As I recall, you asked me a bunch of questions like that in my deposition, and my answer remains the same. No, I provided you with all of that information as part of my file. You have access to all of the inputs and outputs for the simulation that I ran.
Okay, and that was on the pages that you sent me that we went over with the wrong model on it.
There were hundreds of pages associated with the inputs and outputs of the simulation. And again, that was not the wrong model. That was just the wrong label associated with the base model that I used for the CAD.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bell. Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Bailey, can a biomechanical engineer take your calculations and tell us how your acceleration data would impact the human body?
Absolutely. That's a common situation, is for me to calculate what's occurring with the vehicles and the motion of the vehicles themselves. And then a biomechanical engineer using that data to understand how that's affecting the individuals that are actually physically present inside the vehicle.
Yeah, if I told you, Mr. Bailey, that there was no video of Mr. Bennett's sworn testimony in 2022, would you have any reason to disagree with that?
No.
All right. You remember Mr. Scholl brought up Plaintiff's Exhibit 109, this itemized repair invoice of $4,700, roughly $4,700. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any idea which truck this estimate or repair estimate is regarding?
No, I don't. There's no indication on that form, or at least none that I saw. And again, it would be more consistent with the number 4 truck than it is with the number 6 truck, just based on the itemization that I saw on that.
And in terms of the accident report that had the number 3 in the debilitating damage, do you have any idea what the officer's referring to that was debilitating damage?
Your Honor, I object. It misstates the record.
Overruled.
Did you understand my question? Do you remember in the accident?
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
yes. Yes. Just to clarify, I believe it was functional damage is the term that was used by by that police report. And no, I don't know. That is an opinion of the officer at the time that the report is written. It's not necessarily based on any specific evidence or facts other than just a quick opinion that the officer comes to and a conclusion when they're filling out that form. So it could have been based on testimony or statements, not testimony, but statements made by Mr. Bennett or other witnesses on the scene. And it's just a quick analysis that the police officer would have done. So I don't really hold any accuracy to that value other than just a reference point.
Now, in terms of this settlement agreement that the plaintiff's counsel showed you that was between JRC Express and Transcontinental, do you know which truck that settlement agreement was referring to?
Again, there's really no details in that agreement, so I don't know what truck that's in reference to. I don't know the itemization of what it's accounting for. There's really no details in that document.
So it could be related to truck number 4.
It certainly could be.
Now, there was some talk about how you went up and down looking at the guardrails along the rough route of Mr. Bennett. In your tour of I-75 northbound between mile marker 27 and mile marker 36, when Mr. Evans and Mr. Bennett got off the highway, did you see anywhere along that route any indication that there was damage to a guardrail that looked like a truck collided with it?
I was not able to identify any specific location. There was several areas that had been replaced. There were several areas that had some minor amount of impact damage that could have occurred from any vehicle. Nothing specific for this accident or these vehicles. So no, I wasn't able to determine exactly where that occurred.
Yeah, and the testimony we heard previously was that the side swipe into the guardrail happened around 126, 127. Is that your recollection of the testimony?
Yes, yeah, and that's essentially where I was driving up and down in that range within 3 or 4 miles either direction.
Yeah. And then Mr. Scholl asked you some questions about a payment of damage to the guardrail. And I think you testified that you had seen that invoice or receipt.
Yes.
All right. Could you pull up Plaintiff's Exhibit 11, please? If you could expand it out. Description. Is this the invoice that Mr. Scholl was referring to?
As I recall.
Yeah, and if you could read the description, please.
This, excuse me, this invoice covers the cost of labor, transportation, and materials necessary for GDOT, that's Georgia Department of Transportation, to repair guardrail located at I-76 northbound, mile marker 134 at South Perry Parkway, Houston County, Georgia. The damage was discovered on July 1, 2020.
All right. What mile marker again is indicated of that invoice?
That description indicates mile marker 134.
So is it possible that someone paid this invoice thinking there was damage at mile marker 134?
Objection. Foundation.
Overruled.
It very well could be. I don't know.
And could someone have paid that invoice based upon information that was in an accident report?
That's certainly possible. Yes.
You could take that exhibit down, please. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Dabbs? Read or recross?
Just a couple questions. When did you go to the guardrail to inspect?
I honestly don't recall the answer to that. It was after my deposition at some point. I was in Georgia for another matter. So I took the liberty to drive by that area to see if I could locate anything.
So it was after 2023?
Yes, again, it was subsequent to my deposition.
So it was 4 years after this collision that you came in and finally looked at the scene of this accident?
I tried to find the location of the accident just because I happened to be in the area.
All right. I believe you testified earlier, you did find where it happened, correct?
Objection.
No, sir, I couldn't find any evidence, so I could not identify where the accident occurred.
Now, the GDOT, the bill for the guardrail repair, that includes the accident report attached to it, correct? I mean, the accident report is attached to that bill, correct? In this,
As I recall.
not as you recall?
I mean, I think it was all together as one big package, yes.
Right, but the GDOT for the guardrail repair included the accident report from Mr. Bennett's accident on that bill, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Facts not in evidence.
He can answer it if he knows.
As I recall, it was attached to that document. So that was the supporting document that they used to repair the guardrail.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Does that conclude his testimony?
Okay, no further questions, Your
All
Honor.
right. Mr. Bailey, that concludes your testimony. You are released from your subpoena, and you may remove yourself from the virtual system.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Members of the jury, I have asked the defense to have a couple more witnesses lined up. I believe they have a few more here. So we may go a little past 5 o'clock. Is that going to give anybody, that's at my request to the defense. Is that going to give anybody trouble if we go a little past 5 to get another witness in? Okay. All right. If it turns out it's going to be an issue, tell Margaret or get our attention. Okay. All right. All right. You may call your next witness.
At this time, Your Honor, the defense will call Dr. Amber Stern.
You can come across, ma'am.
Thank you.
Dr. Stern, if you could please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
All right, if you could please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Dr. Amber Rathstern, and I am a biomechanical engineer with Engineering Systems, Inc.
How many people work under you?
I have a practice group of about 16 people. I'm the director of biomechanics at ESI, in addition to being a principal consultant.
What is a biomechanical engineer?
Biomechanics is the application of mechanical engineering to the human body. So I have degrees in mechanical engineering, but instead of applying that to, say, designing a machine or parts or looking at how vehicles brake, I'm looking at occupants, people, how they respond to forces and accelerations. Also looking at how people are loaded in everyday types of environments.
Are you a medical doctor?
No,
Do you have a medical degree?
no, I have a PhD in biomedical engineering.
Okay. Rather than go through your 15-page CV line by line, if you could please tell the jury your educational background quickly.
Yes, sorry for the length. I have an academic background, so it's publish or perish, so there's lots of publications and things in there. But my bachelor's degree is in mechanical engineering from the University of North Carolina in Charlotte with a minor in mathematics. I have a master's of science degree in mechanical engineering with a specialty in biomechanics from Virginia Tech. And then I went on and finished my PhD through a joint program with Virginia Tech and Wake Forest. And that's where I received my biomedical engineering PhD. And then I completed a postdoctorate fellowship at Wake Forest's Institute for Regenerative Medicine, or WFERM. And there I studied primarily biomedical engineering, but also tissue engineering and regenerative medicine.
And have you taught in the field of biomechanical engineering?
Yes, I was on faculty at the University of Missouri, Kansas City for a few years. I taught in the mechanical engineering department and also had a research laboratory in the School of Dentistry, which sounds very odd, but that's where their bone biomechanics and impact biomechanics laboratory was housed. I wasn't a fan of the Midwest, so I moved back to Charlotte in 2013.
All right, and have you ever been published in the field of biomechanics?
Yes, I have. I have 30 peer-reviewed publications along with numerous conference abstracts, publications, and presentations.
When you say peer-reviewed publications, what does that mean?
It means you are submitting your study or journal article to a journal that reviews it without knowing who you are. So they send these manuscripts out to your peers, usually other researchers, and they blind them so they don't know who the co-authors are. I'm an editor and, or sorry, I'm a reviewer for several different journals, and the editor sends out manuscripts. So I do the same thing in the areas of impact biomechanics, bone research, and automotive, the Society of Automotive Engineers.
If you wouldn't mind, just give the jury like two publications that are kind of related to, the trial we're here today.
Sure. I'm a co-author on two publications related to measuring head and lumbar accelerations as a result of lateral vehicle impacts and everyday activities. So in these studies, we looked at how folks move as a result of lateral impacts, measured the head and lumbar accelerations that are experienced during these events, and then also other activities like running, sitting quickly in a chair, jumping jacks, heading a soccer ball, all sorts of random things that we were able to then collect the data and publish in the Biomedical Sciences and Instrumentation Journal.
And you talked about these studies. Did any of these studies involve crash test dummies?
Not that particular study, but I have conducted a lot of research regarding crash test dummies, human volunteers, and cadavers while at Virginia Tech and Wake Forest.
How long have you been doing biomechanical analyses?
Goodness, I'm going back to 2003 would be when I finished up my senior design project at UNC Charlotte. And then from there started doing crash testing and other research at the Center for Injury Biomechanics at Virginia Tech. And then while I was at Wake Forest University, did research at the Center for Injury Research and Engineering Network, or CIREN. It's a publicly funded study and sponsored by NHTSA. So at Wake Forest Baptist Hospital, when an individual was injured in a motor vehicle crash and came into the emergency room, they were given the option to enroll in our study. And we would then go out and inspect the vehicles, recreate the crash, and then from there look at tying the injuries that were sustained to the intrusion in the vehicle or the lack of a seatbelt restraint. And then that gets entered into a government database.
Have you served as an expert witness in the field of biomechanical engineering before?
I have.
How many times?
Since 2014, I have been to trial probably 30 times.
How many total incident analyses have you done?
Thousands.
In these analyses of these incidents, does it require to actually go to the scene of an incident all the time?
No.
Okay. And why is that?
So you can rely on additional information beyond what's at the scene. Many times I'm involved in cases years after the incidents or accidents occur. So a lot of the evidence is gone, or there wasn't any evidence there to begin with.
Is that where these studies come in handy in your experience?
Absolutely.
All right. Obviously, you were retained by our firm.
Yes.
All right. And the fact that we retained you, does that change your opinions either way?
No, I offer testimony or the ability to conduct biomechanical analyses to both plaintiffs and defendants, as well as non-litigation cases. I'm also retained directly by companies to do independent research or validation of products before they're put on the market.
In forming your opinions for this case, do you rely upon accident reconstructionists?
I do.
And do you rely upon the data and the opinions that they generate from that data to form your opinions?
Yes.
And how does an accident reconstructionist work with a biomechanical engineer?
Yes, so the accident reconstructionist looks at the vehicle and determines the vehicle dynamics, or how a vehicle moves as a result of an impact or event. And then I look at the occupant within the vehicle. So I take those various forces or accelerations that are determined for the vehicle, use that as the environment that the occupant is going to be in, and look at what effect that would have on the human body.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense will formally tender Dr. Stern as an expert in biomechanical engineering.
All right, plaintiff?
No objection.
All right, I'll allow the testimony.
So we can get this question out of the way, Dr. Stern, as the project director on biomechanical and overseeing the people that are under you, how much has ESI billed us for this case?
So for this case, I think it was around $60,000 to $70,000 was billed totally. A majority of that, well over half, would have been the simulation or animation that was conducted by Mr. Bailey. The rest of that would be either support. We have nurses on staff that assist with medical records review, and then Mr. Bailey's time and my time.
Is that normal billing for a case like this?
Certainly for one that goes all the way through depositions and trial and has a reconstruction associated with it, yes.
Yeah. Dr. Stern, there was testimony from Mr. Bailey that based upon the evidence provided to him, the research he did, as well in reviewing the testimony, that he calculated 4.2 Gs of acceleration forward and to the right, roughly at 45 to 60 degrees. When you hear that information from an accident reconstructionist, how does that factor in your opinions as to what's happening in the cab of a tractor, particularly one where it's alleged that it struck a guardrail?
Yeah, so for this case, with the quantification that was handed to me from Mr. Bailey, the occupant, in this case, Mr. Bennett, would move forward and to the right relative to the interior of the tractor cab as a result of any potential impact to the guardrail. 4.2 Gs as a resultant vector, so getting back into physics a little bit, resultant vector is acting at that 45 degrees, and it'll have components of forward and lateral with that 45 degrees. So the forward component would be roughly 3 Gs, and the lateral component would also be about 3 Gs, so equal parts forward and lateral. So that, to me, puts that into context. And overall, 3G longitudinal, 3G lateral, or 4.2 G resultant is well within the volunteer types of exposures we use for crash testing.
All right, in terms of these Gs, are you able to help out everyone in here like me who flunked physics and went into the practice of law? Like, what does 4.2 Gs, what's similar to the body experiencing 4.2 Gs of acceleration? And just dumb it down for us.
Yeah, so with 4.2 Gs acting at 45 degrees, you would go forward and to the right. You'd be wearing your seatbelt, in this case, is what was testified to. So the shoulder belt would arrest the forward motion, and then the lateral motion would just kind of be a rocking forward. The head and neck would be in line with each other with the torso. To put this in context, we do volunteer testing in the frontal and lateral direction at 5 to 6 Gs of acceleration, so forward or lateral, 5 to 6 Gs. If you're on bumper cars, those can get up to 6 or 7 Gs as well. Some studies have measured 5 Gs for bumper cars. Trying to think. So as far as that's the environment of what that 3G and longitudinal and 3G lateral would be, as far as what the head and lumbar acceleration would be in an environment like that, it would be similar to the vehicle, since there are no impacts occurring with that rocking forward and to the right. So the head and lumbar spine would also experience around 4.2 Gs resultant, and that would be put into context with running is 5 to 6 Gs at the head and lumbar spine, sitting quickly in a chair, kind of just like falling back after a hard day at work kind of thing, that can get up to 5 or 6 Gs as well.
Now, Dr. Stern, have you participated in human testing of these forces on the human body?
I have from multiple aspects. So I mentioned the articles that I published earlier. So I've organized these types of studies. I have been a volunteer in these types of studies. So being the guinea pig that is signing up for these crash testing studies. And I've also served on institutional review boards at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and Virginia Tech. So any kind of testing involving human subjects at the university needs to go through approval because you can't just expose somebody to, hey, we're going to go take this vehicle and run it into a brick wall at 45 miles an hour. You know, you have to have a protocol and have all that approved. And so I've also been on the board that approves these types of testing protocols.
Now, in terms of the 4.2 Gs that Mr. Bailey provided to you, are you able to, and assuming this impact occurred the way Mr. Bennett described, sitting in your chair, are you able to describe to the jury what the body would look like in a 4.2 G acceleration at 45 to 60 degrees?
Yes, so you would have that arresting from the shoulder belt for the longitudinal component and then some rightward movement as well. So it'd be forward and to the right and then rocking backwards. This is published in numerous studies, including some that I was a volunteer in.
Would there be any whiplash of the head backwards?
No, I would not expect any. So that is based on your whole body is moving forward and to the right together and then rocking back. The shoulder belt does arrest the torso, so the head might go a little bit farther than the torso, but there's no resulting force from the rear end of the vehicle to cause any type of motion beyond the headrest after you return back to that initially seated position.
So if I understand your testimony, your head could not snap back as you're returning back to your headrest.
No, because there's no impetus to make the head travel faster than the torso. It's traveling together.
Okay, you weren't here for the testimony on Friday, but Mr. Bennett testified that he was putting in steering inputs, trying to get the sway or the swag back of his trailer back in line. Hearing that, the testimony of putting in these turning inputs, what's that do to the body?
So there may be some lateral movement side to side, but Mr. Bennett did not testify in his deposition that his vehicle was out of control. He was moving the steering wheel. So he would be the one that's controlling that movement. So he would be somewhat aware of that input. So just as if you're turning quickly around a corner, you're not thrown to the other side of the vehicle. You might move some, you would feel it, but you're not necessarily going to be thrown anywhere within the vehicle. It's not an impact.
So just doing steering inputs to get your tractor back into control, would that throw your body about the cab in your expert opinion?
There might be some movement side to side, but I would not expect a throwing motion just from steering maneuvers on the roadway.
And you're not going to testify as to whether this incident, as described by Mr. Bennett, caused his central cord syndrome, are you?
No, I'm not a medical doctor and don't have any opinions regarding medical causation or diagnoses.
And your opinions in this case are only based upon the fact that there was actual impact with the guardrail?
That was the peak acceleration that was determined by Mr. Bailey if there was a impact with the guardrail.
If there was no guardrail that was struck, would there be any forces imparted upon him that would have caused his body to cause his head to flex backward?
I wouldn't expect with any forward flexion. If there's hard braking or steering, there may be some forward movement with the hard braking or some lateral movement with the steering, but there was no rearward impact.
Are you aware of any evidence that there was a rear impact behind Mr. Bennett's tractor?
No.
So you're not aware of any evidence that would cause his head to extend backwards with any, there's not any evidence that indicates his head extended backwards?
No.
Let me ask you this question. What does the biomechanical science tell us about whether the body experiences sufficient forces at 4.2 Gs to sustain a spinal cord injury involving the vertebrae, discs, or the cord?
So I don't have any specific opinions related to injury causation in this case. I can speak to the volunteer studies that we've conducted. In those volunteer studies, we saw individuals exposed to numerous impacts, either longitudinal or lateral or oblique, which would be a 45-degree angle type of impact. And those individuals sustained maybe transient headache or possible neck soreness. A lot of times there were some complaints regarding the instrumentation that they had to wear, really tight headbands, because we couldn't put accelerometers in the middle of their head like you can with crash test dummies. So we have to strap them really tightly to the head, outside of the head, and the same thing for the lumbar spine.
And that's assuming there was a contact with something.
Some of these studies were conducted pneumatically, so they did not have an actual vehicle-to-vehicle impact, but others certainly did. We had staged vehicle-to-vehicle impacts.
No further questions. Thank you, Dr. Stern.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Dabbs? All right, Cross?
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Stern, you're saying that the 4.2 G's number, G stands for gravity, correct?
It's a G, so it doesn't necessarily stand for gravity. It's a G, it's a unit. And if you don't mind, Dr. Stern, since I do have a PhD.
Okay, Dr. Stern, but you're not a medical doctor though, correct?
No.
Just going back to my question, 4.2 G's, what does G stand for? What is the G?
It's a unit. So 1G is what we're experiencing right now as we sit here. So that may be what you're referring to. That 4.2 Gs is 4.2 times the Earth's gravity.
Okay, and so 4.2, so if I were to fall back, that'd be 1G, and if 4 times that amount would be 4.2 Gs, correct?
Well, as you're falling back, 1G is what would be pulling you to the Earth. Once you impact the ground, you would likely experience, we've measured head accelerations of 40 to 50 Gs with head impacts to the ground, or even higher if it's during sports, like with football, we've measured 80 to 90 Gs with head impacts to the ground.
But 4.2 Gs is 4.2 times the force of gravity, or the acceleration due to gravity.
Yes, acceleration, thank
Okay.
you.
And you said you spent, or you've been paid, or your company's been paid $60,000 to $70,000 in this case.
Correct, since 2022 is when we first opened this case.
Okay, and half of that has been on Mr. Bailey's simulation.
Over half, yes.
Okay, and the number that he came up with is 4.2 Gs is critical to your analysis, correct?
Yes, that's what I'm relying on in terms of the maximum severity of the potential impact with the guardrail.
And so if the jury doesn't believe his testimony, doesn't believe it's scientifically sound, then your testimony as well falls, doesn't it?
Depends. So my opinions regarding how an occupant moves at a 45-degree PDOF, that stands no matter how severe it is, you're going to move in that same direction. It's Newton's laws of physics. In regard to the total amount of excursion or the head and lumbar accelerations, those could certainly change. So if it's lower, that would be lower head and lumbar accelerations. And if it's higher, higher head and lumbar accelerations.
Now, Dr. Stern, you cannot medically treat patients, correct?
No, I don't have an MD.
And you can't diagnose patients?
No.
And you didn't look at Mr. Bennett's MRI films in this case, correct?
No, I did not.
Now, since you're not a medical doctor, you're not legally allowed to give the opinion that this accident did or did not cause his injuries, correct?
I'm not an attorney, so I don't know the actual laws related to that, but I don't offer testimony related to whether or not an individual was injured in a particular incident.
Right, and that's because in a DeKalb County case recently, your opinion was thrown out because you did make that, did give that opinion that only a medical doctor can give, correct?
No, I provided an opinion regarding a rotator cuff biomechanical mechanism of how a rotator cuff injury occurs. And the judge in that case interpreted that as medical causation, but I've offered the same opinion in probably 30 different states, 30 different cases in various states.
And judges in Texas and Florida have also not allowed your opinions in court cases and not let the jury hear your opinions, correct?
In one case in Florida, the judge did not like the term safe and ethical, so I had to remove that from an opinion, even though I do determine what's safe and ethical to do volunteer testing, as we talked about. And in Texas, I had a testimony that was not allowed in because the attorney represented I was going to say one thing, and I actually had different opinions than what was represented.
Now, Mr. Fletcher and Mr. Moffitt's firm have hired you 10 or 15 times as an expert, correct?
Yes, since 2013.
Okay. And since you're not a medical doctor and can't give the causation opinions, would you defer to a medical doctor in this case as to causation of Mr. Bennett's injuries?
I don't have any opinions regarding medical causation.
So you would defer to a doctor in that case?
I don't have an opinion of who to defer to about medical opinions.
What about Dr. Frankel? Are you familiar with Dr. Frankel?
I'm aware that he's an expert in this case.
And he's a medical doctor, a surgeon hired by the defendants in this case. Would you defer to him and on the issue of medical causation?
I don't have an opinion.
Have you read any of it? Have you talked to him, read any of his information?
No, not beyond just a disclosure.
Are you aware that Dr. Frankel, the defense expert, the defense surgeon, has testified that he believes Mr. Bennett suffered an injury in this incident,
I don't have an opinion.
but you wouldn't defer to him?
No, I have
Would
no
you defer to
opinion.
Mr. Bennett's doctors, Dr. Bennix and Malone and Chapman, who also said that Mr. Bennett suffered an injury in this incident?
I'm a biomechanical engineer. I do not have an opinion regarding medical causation or who I would defer to or who I think is correct.
But you did review all Mr. Bennett's medical records, correct?
I reviewed the medical records that were provided. I don't know if it is all of them, since a majority of this work was conducted prior to 2023.
And looking at the records, you saw that Mr. Bennett was diagnosed with central cord syndrome, correct?
I did.
What is central cord syndrome?
When the spinal cord is compressed and causes various types of symptoms.
Okay, and in Mr. Bennett's medical records, you saw his diagnosis of underlying cervical stenosis, did you not?
I did.
What is underlying cervical stenosis?
When the spinal canal is narrowed, a lot of times due to congenital or changes with age.
You don't disagree that Mr. Bennett had moderate to severe narrowing of his spinal canal, do you?
I saw that on his MRI report. You had asked earlier if I reviewed the actual MRI. I didn't, but I did review the MRI report, CT report, and various other medical imaging that reports that did include that description in there.
And stenosis and spinal cord narrowing can make a patient much more likely to suffer spinal cord injury than someone without that condition, correct?
Potentially.
Okay. And you don't have the medical training to identify different injury tolerance levels in different patients, do you?
I don't have any opinion regarding injury or medical causation.
Okay, but you agree that one person's susceptibility to injury is different from someone else's?
In general, yes.
Okay. And anatomic vulnerabilities can make one person more likely to get injured in an accident than another person in the same accident?
Sure. In general, I've certainly seen that in various cases.
And you don't know anything about Mr. Bennett's, besides the stenosis, you don't know anything about his physiology and how it compares to other people and whether it's susceptible to injury, correct?
I don't have any opinions regarding his particular susceptibility. I did see his age, height, weight that were provided in his medical records. That shows that he's within the same volunteer population as many of the volunteer subjects.
Did all of them have severe stenosis?
In most of the studies, no imaging was conducted, so we don't know.
Are you aware that Dr. Frankel testified that if someone has underlying stenosis like Mr. Bennett, that a trivial trauma could cause CCS, central cord syndrome, like he suffered from?
I don't have an opinion.
Okay. Well, if someone with stenosis can suffer a spinal cord injury by a trivial impact, Do you think someone like Mr. Bennett, if he has that condition, should do any volunteer testing?
I don't have an opinion one way or the other there in terms of the relative severity of the subject incident. Sitting quickly in a chair or running puts just as much or more loading on the cervical spine than the subject incident would.
Okay, sitting in a barber's chair and getting a trim or putting your head back at a dentist office briskly is more of a trauma than it is, it's less of a trauma than 4.2 Gs, correct?
I don't know specifically what those are. So in our volunteer studies, we've done sitting quickly in an office chair, sitting quickly in a chair like this that does have that recline to it. We've also seen hardback chair studies. The Funk paper, which was included in my file, actually had a wooden back and wooden seat chair. So various types of chairs, but I'm not aware of one that measured a barber chair or a dentist chair.
So if you believe Mr. Bennett that he hit the guardrail at 63 miles per hour, like he's testified in his deposition, and then did the other, we'll just take that, he hit the guardrail at 63 miles per hour, that would be more of a force or acceleration than just sitting down in a chair, wouldn't you agree?
No, absolutely not, based on the studies that I've referenced, co-authored, and participated in.
So sitting down in a chair is at least as much force as hitting a guardrail at 63 miles per hour.
Yes, because this was a glancing blow that was 4.2 Gs or less. And so the lateral component was 3 Gs, longitudinal component was also 3 Gs. And when you look at the volunteer studies that have been conducted, we see head and lumbar accelerations above 5 and 6 Gs.
How much acceleration is required to move a herniated disc onto the spinal cord?
I don't have an opinion.
How much acceleration is required to move herniated disc and move spinal material onto the cord for someone with severe stenosis?
Same, I don't have a particular opinion there. This is a relative comparison.
But all the studies that you're looking at are for people, are what people that don't necessarily have the condition that Mr. Bennett had and what they suffer and what they experience, but it's not people with the condition that Mr. Bennett has, is it?
So it's purely physics-based. So individuals with pre-existing conditions are allowed to participate, just like they're allowed to go on roller coasters or things like that. It's physics-based. So we also do the same testing with cadavers and crash test dummies. In those studies, you're not having any reports of pain or injury. We're actually just measuring the accelerations and the occupant kinematics or motion. So the physics of it would be the same for Mr. Bennett to sit in a chair as it would be for Mr. Bennett in a 4.2 G impact. He can be his own control. So if he participated in any of these activities, the head and lumbar acceleration would be the same for him as it would be in the subject incident.
Now, do you conduct these volunteer studies,
Yes.
these crash tests? And the people that come in there, you don't do MRIs to see what their condition is before they engage in the tests?
No, because it's so low of an acceleration, 3 to 5 Gs is not that forceful.
Do you get waivers from them?
We do. We do informed consent, similar to the same warning that you would see before a roller coaster ride. So to let them know this is what's going to happen, you'll have to wear different types of equipment. It's going to be, an hour or 2 hours, and it's all put into the informed consent. Those are required by the institutional review boards. So everybody knows what they're signing up for. It's not a 45-mile-per-hour impact into a wall type of thing.
Were you provided any documents in the medical records showing that Mr. Bennett ever had any neck or back issues at all in his lifetime prior to this wreck?
I don't recall specifically, but nothing comes to mind.
Now, your opinions that this might have happened, and if it did happen, I'm talking about the impact of the guardrail. It might have happened, and if it did happen, it wouldn't have caused any damage. Is that essentially your opinion?
No, my opinion is as a result of the 4.2 G impact at a 45-degree to 60-degree PDOF, Mr. Bennett would have moved forward and to the right. His torso would have loaded the shoulder belts. The head and torso would remain largely in line with each other. And then the rebound motion back to an initially seated position would not result in any extensive extension of the cervical spine.
Did you analyze the left and right head movements you said were happening before his impact with the guardrail?
So as a result of the lateral movements and steering movements left and right, yes, that would be just general steering input. We have lots of studies related to both driver-initiated and vehicle-initiated steering. With more and more autonomous vehicles coming into the market, the vehicles are making decisions that you might not be aware of. And so the vehicle will lane correct or course correct or put on brakes when you're not the one putting brakes on. So all of those types of things are being looked at from occupant kinematics. So as far as any steering goes, yes. In terms of which way Mr. Bennett would have actually been looking at the time of impact with the guardrail, I don't have a specific opinion.
Mr. Bennett testified that his head was moving left and right like a bobblehead. He didn't say he was inputting steering inputs when he was going back and forth. Do you understand that?
I didn't recall bobblehead in the deposition, but in terms of any movements left and right, I would expect them to be largely in line with the torso. The air ride seat would provide some attenuation as well. And then the seat belt, once 0.7 Gs are reached, the shoulder belt is required to lock by FMVSS or Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. Seat belts are required to lock. And so that's not a pre-tensioner that's going to pull you back into the seat. That's the same locking mechanism you experience if you drop your sunglasses on the ground and try to reach down too quickly, or drop your cell phone and try and pick it up quickly. The shoulder belt will lock.
Okay, you read 34 and 76 of his deposition where he talks about his head going back and forth while the trailer was going back or the truck was going back and forth, haven't you?
Yes, he said left, right, left, right.
All right. And he talked about other things besides the guardrail impact, other forces on his body, not just the guardrail impact in his deposition, did he not?
I would have to look back. There was an allusion to possibly a steering wheel impact between his head. And then in the medical records, he described hitting the driver's side window or driver's side door. So both of those also would not be expected as a result of guardrail impact or steering input.
Now, you didn't consider Mr. Bennett's individual physiology, his stenosis, or his severely narrow spinal canal at all in your analysis, correct?
I did. So my opinion is that Mr. Bennett, in whatever condition he was in, him sitting down quickly in a chair or him running would put the same amount of load or more on his cervical spine than the subject incident would have.
Okay, but how would it affect someone with his stenosis in the case of moving spinal material onto his spinal cord?
Yeah, I don't have an opinion about that. It's more just the relative loading would be the same or more for other events.
Now, you never visited the scene of the crash or did any accident reconstruction in this case, did you?
No, I relied on Rob Bailey for that. He has a PE or a professional engineering license, as do I, and it is very common practice for professional engineers to rely on the work of other professional engineers.
I believe you testified in your deposition, though, that you could do all the work he did?
Not necessarily all the work he did. I have done accident reconstruction in the past. I do not know how to use HVE beyond what it generally does. I've never physically taken a class to use HVE or been the one to input into the program what HVE does. So I'm familiar with it, but I'm not the one that does that kind of reconstruction.
Did you look at all the file materials that he looked at?
Not necessarily all of them. I skimmed them when they came in to see if it was a medical record or photographs, and worked with my project coordinator, Lizzie Manzeri, to log all of the file material. So I did lay eyes on a lot of the file material, but didn't necessarily review all of it in detail.
Did you look at the guardrail repair bill?
I don't recall that one.
Did you look at the truck repair agreement between the defendant and the owner of the truck?
I did see that in there, but I don't recall any specifics about it. I would have just told Lizzie to log it in a particular area.
You didn't see where they paid $3,800 to pay for the damage from the impact with the guardrail in this case?
I don't specifically recall.
Did you look at the accident report and see where the officer reported functional damage to the vehicle, Mr. Bennett's vehicle?
I did look at the motor vehicle report. I don't remember that specific entry offhand. I would have to go back and double check.
How much are you being paid by the hour for your testimony today? Or what is being billed to the defendants for this?
I'm a salaried employee, so I'm not being paid anything hourly to be here. ESI does bill my time. It is $4.85 an hour for me to be at trial.
And that's up from 425 just a couple of years ago when we did your deposition.
Correct.
And a vast majority of your cases, you're paid by the defense and defense attorneys, correct?
In terms of retention, I'm retained probably 75% of the time by defense, 25% of the times by plaintiff.
And you've got 350 people in your group with Mr. Bailey, your company?
We are up to 450-ish at this point.
And 90% of the work that that company does is just testifying in legal cases like this, correct?
No, not at all. That may be me. If you're looking back at my testimony, that would have just been for me. A majority of the work that I do that is not management, so the work that is billed out of ESI for my time, about 90% of it is related to some sort of litigation. ESI does quite a bit of work for companies that's not litigation based. ESI does insurance work going out, and our civil group goes and inspects houses and buildings after hurricanes, and just all sorts of, we do everything from metallurgy to biomechanics to civil engineering and watershed studies.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Redirect.
No, Your Honor.
All right. All right, may she be released?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Dr. Stern, you're released from your subpoena. You've completed your testimony. You're free to go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all come talk to me real quick.
to say that y'all are very good, because most of the juries come in and they pile all over each other. Y'all have a system. I'm very impressed. All right, Mr. Fletcher, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Dennis Burke.
Mr. Burke, if you'll come on around.
If you could raise your right hand, Mr. Burke. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Robert Dennis Burke.
Where do you currently work?
I work with transportation compliance experts out of Orange Beach, Alabama.
And what does transportation compliant experts do? What's their specialty?
We provide litigation support in trucking cases, and also we have a couple of people that do OSHA stuff.
Okay. In terms of your experience to be an expert in the field, what is your professional experience? What did you do in the past that makes you a transportation expert?
For about a little over 30 years, I was special agent with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration.
And what does the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration do?
They regulate interstate motor carriers and make sure they're in compliance, make sure that the drivers are in compliance and the motor carriers in compliance.
And what did you do as a part of the FMCSA? What was your role?
I was a senior compliance and enforcement agent. I would conduct investigations on motor carriers, hazardous material shippers, provided training to junior employees. I assisted other federal agencies. FBI comes to mind, and NTSB comes to mind.
Are there regulations that guide the motor carrier industry?
Yes, they're called the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations.
And in terms of those regulations, as an enforcement officer, would you have to apply those regulations when you investigated motor carriers?
Yes, sir, I would. I would have to check to make sure the motor carrier was in substantial compliance.
All right. And other than a special agent, and I have a copy here of your CV, other than being a special agent, did you rise through the ranks of the FMCSA?
Yes, I did. I was an instructor for the agency for several years. I was a lead instructor. I was also a field office supervisor for the Houston and San Antonio field offices. Basically, we covered the southern half of Texas, and I had 9 investigators that I was in charge of.
As a special agent for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, did it require you to be kind of like an expert in applying the regulations?
Yes, sir, very much so.
All right. At its time, Your Honor, I would like to tender Mr. Burke as an expert in safety and compliance.
Yes. Vaudeer then. If you have questions about the tender of the responses for you to Vaudeer that. Do you want to Vaudeer or do you want to change the designation? I don't have a preference. I'm just saying. Okay, you can Vaudeer man. Yeah, we'll let him Vaudeer. All right. All right, you may Vaudeer the witness on the tendering, specifically as to the tendering of the expert in his field.
With the jury or without the jury?
Do what?
With the jury or without the jury?
Yes, with.
Okay. Mr. Burke. In your experience enforcing the regulations, does that require, were you ever involved in creating those regulations?
Occasionally, I would provide input. Yes, sir.
Were you one of the individuals responsible for actually drafting the updated language?
No, sir. That's all done in Washington, D.C.
Okay. And have you ever written any journals or treatises on what the meaning of the regulations is?
No, sir.
Have you ever taught the meaning of the regulations or the interpretation of the regulations at any colleges, universities, any place like that?
I did for the Transportation Safety Institute. There were 6 of us that developed the lesson plan, and it was to train other federal investigators and also state investigators.
And that's on how law enforcement is meant to interpret those guidelines when they enforce them? Is that what you were teaching?
We were teaching what the regulations, how to apply the regulations, and how to determine if the motor carrier was in non-compliance.
Okay. But I guess my question on that is that's for the purposes of enforcement of those regulations from a law enforcement standpoint, correct?
Well, we weren't really considered law enforcement. We were considered what they call regulators, and we just ensured that the motor carrier was in compliance with the federal motor carrier safety regulations.
And if they weren't in compliance, they were,
It could have a negative impact on their safety rating, and if there were certain violations, we would create an enforcement report, which would be sent up to the local jurisdiction for Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration.
I don't think you have any other questions for me, Your Honor.
All right. Anyone else need access to the record before I rule on the tendering of this individual as an expert in the safety and enforcement of the federal motor carrier regulations? Did I get that right?
Close enough, Your Honor.
Close enough.
Yeah, we've got no further input other than what he previously qualified on his testimony.
All right. Any additional objections?
No, Your Honor.
All right. The objection's overruled. I'll allow the testimony. Mr. Fletcher, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Burke, we've heard some testimony from this Mr. Napier that the federal motor carrier safety regulations are a minimum standard. What do you say about that?
No, sir, that's the gold standard, and within the regulations itself, it says that they're stringent.
Oh, sorry, there was a cough over that. The regulations say what?
They're stringent.
And let's have him pull the mic. If you pull the mic up, it'll get really loud. You just got to get close to it.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do some karaoke later. Now, in terms of the, Mr. Napier also said that, there are industry standards that over and above the federal motor carrier safety regulations. Are there any industry standards you're aware of that are codified or written?
No, sir, those are suggestions. They're not, you can't violate a suggestion. What you have to do is you have to follow the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, their rules.
Yeah, and is that because the rules are rigorous?
Yes, sir, very much so.
All right, just try to put that microphone right in front of you. Don't be afraid of it. All right. Now, in your experience as a special agent for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, if a driver had a CDL, a medical certificate, and a 7-year clean MVR, would that driver be allowed to drive?
Yes, sir.
Now, we heard some testimony earlier last week from Mr. Bennett that he was driving and holding his cell phone. Is that allowed under the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations?
No, sir, that's against the regulations in Part 39060.
Your Honor, we have no further questions.
Cross.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Burke, you were just asked about Mr. Bennett holding a cell phone towards the end of his interaction with Mr. Evans. And
Yes,
you said that was a violation of the regulations.
Yes, sir, it is.
Is failure to maintain lane a violation of the regulations?
That would be a state regulation. There's
So-
nothing in the federal regulations about that.
Nothing in the federal regulations about a driver weaving.
No, sir, that would be a state regulation.
Is it a violation for a driver with insulin-dependent diabetes diagnosis without having gone through the rigorous testing and of a qualified endocrinologist? Is it a violation of the regulations for that person to be driving?
That would be up to the certified medical examiner to make that determination.
Okay. When you're doing your investigations, when you were doing your investigations as a Department of Transportation, what was your what was your word? Was it a special investigator or?
Special agent is
Special
what we were credentialed.
Okay. Were you given, like, one of the things I was wondering about, were you looking at, or did you use the electronic field operations training manual?
Yes, sir.
That's one of the things you utilized?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when you talk about, in some of those sections, they talk about an SI, is that a safety inspector?
Safety investigator.
Safety investigator, okay. Safety investigators are involved usually when? After an incident happens, or can they be involved before something happens?
It can be before.
Okay, and can you pull up the page, I believe it's 71 of that electronic field operations training manual, please?
Your Honor, can we see what this is gonna say before it's put up there?
It's the training manual that he uses.
All right, they have the right to ask to see it before it's
Yeah.
published. Just
Sure.
show it to them. And what exhibit is this?
It's not an exhibit yet, we had planned, Your Honor.
Okay.
It was, just for impeachment. And Your Honor, since it's something I just learned of recently, I can email it to yourself or the defense to look at, or they can look at
You
it.
can email it to them. Let's find it out.
It's a fairly large file, so it might take time. I apologize for this. Would you like me to email copy to the court as well?
Yeah, just grab the thread that we've been swapping the exhibits with, and that way everybody will have a copy instantly.
I apologize, 15 megabytes is taking a while to attach.
While it's waiting to download, maybe we can approach, Your Honor.
Sure. Come on up. redirect?
No questions, Your Honor.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, that concludes his testimony. May he be excused?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Sir, you've concluded your testimony. You're free to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody, anything else for? All right, so, the attorneys have been speaking with me on each of the breaks about kind of where we're at and where things are go. As I told you all, we're gonna run a little past 5 tonight. Appreciate y'all's patience. The next witness is gonna take, a little over an hour or so, and so we're gonna go ahead and cut, for the night. I've got a little housekeeping I've gotta do with them anyway. So let's do a couple of odds and ends. Number one, I'm gonna do my dramatic reading again. As I told you, you'll be able to repeat this back to me, but it is my job to say it every time. Members of the jury, while you're outside this courtroom, do not talk about this case with anyone nor conduct any investigation about this case whatsoever. You may only receive information about this case from 2 sources. The evidence which you will receive from the witnesses and the exhibits, and the law which you will receive from me and no other source. If you all will put your bags back in the room, put your face down, we will resume tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So if you all will just be here right at 9 o'clock. Margaret, if you'll step up here. You all can step in the jury room. Okay? Y'all can just